but most people call me Pulihe, and I work at the University of Hawaii at Mānoa. Tonight, I've been asked to present an oli to begin us, and I'd like to present a chant called Mānoa, written by Kamanamaikalani. Some of you might know her. This chant speaks about the a'ali'i, and most of us, or some of us at least, know this ola lamaʻiau. The a'ali'i kumakani maiau, awali makani mānai kulai. I am the wind withstanding a'ali'i, no wind can topple me over. I want to present this chant because, for two reasons. First, to honor the people who will be on the stage after me, and the ways that they resemble and really lead as a'ali'i for us. Rooted in Hawaii, drawing their nourishment from Hawaii, and becoming these resilient leaders for our community, providing beauty and medicine, and even sometimes the protection needed. But also because this a'ali'i is what we are looking for in the future, right? That we grow the next generation and the generation after that who can also be a'ali'i for our communities. And not only here in Hawaii, but really around the world, to be rooted wherever they come from, to draw from the nourishment of that aina, and have to withstand some kinds of challenges, hopefully less and less with each generation, and to be the medicine and the beauty and the protection their families, their communities, and their aina needs.
Huli Kapuaʻala, we hoka hawa umaitamo, o hapola e you wait away. Kapuaʻala buya usamu, wana hoiamo.
Aloha mai kako. My name is Jonathan Osorio. I'm the Dean of the School of Hawaiian Knowledge. It's a pleasure to be here to introduce or sit. I'm not sure exactly what I'm supposed to do. In fact, one thing I knew to do was to bring my copy of this book with me. So I just want to make sure I don't get charged for this again. But the other thing I wanted to do was to be able to speak a few minutes about the importance of works like this, authors who write about Pacific Islanders, Polynesians, that larger, older ancestral society from which we Kamanamaikalani descend, and the connections that we have between us. And I was also asked to sing something, so I brought my guitar. There's nothing like walking through a Waikiki hotel with a guitar. I had 3 requests for the suite they're running. But to be serious again, the topic is particularly significant for us because over the last 20, 30 years, actually longer because it goes back to the nuclear-free and independent movement in the Pacific, way back in the 1970s and 1980s, with folks like Naone and were making common cause, right, with Pacific Islanders in Vanuatu, and all over the South Pacific, and not necessarily with Polynesians either. And this is a book that focuses properly on the kinds of things that unite us as a people, our language, our sense of history, our genealogies, and also our colonial and modern history. How we have been affected in Hawaii, like every other place in the Pacific, by capitalism, by conversion, by occupation, by militarism, the kinds of things that, the ills that have been forced on us historically, they also bind us together. What's really important about a book like this is that so many of the contemporary problems that we are seeing in the world, unleashed by those very same forces, capital, individuality, militarism, power, they've unleashed forces in our climate that they can't control. So when it comes to us to save the planet, I think you'll see that in this book. And I think that strengthening the ties between us and our Polynesian cousins is really important. I will also say it is important that we extend those contacts throughout Oceania, throughout Mānoa. And so that's why I'm going to do the song that I'm going to do, and then I'm going to get out of here and let you have that conversation. In 2014 or 2015, I attended a conference in Papua New Guinea, a conference that I helped plan in a 2-week visit in Fiji about a year before. So I've been in Fiji, and then we were in Madang in Papua New Guinea. The conference was called One Solvara, and it was a musical, artistic gathering of musicians and artists who were just really speaking out against globalization, modernization, the takeover of our countries, of our sense of subsistence. And you'll hear that in the verses of this song. Every single person who was invited to come was required to make some kind of artistic contribution. So I wrote this. The name of the conference was One Solvara, which is Melanesian pidgin for one salt water. And the theme and the vision for that conference was that the things that tied us all together were the things that had happened to us, but also the things that would save us were our memory, were our attachments to our people, were our attachments to land. And you'll hear that in this song. The last verse I composed on the last day of the conference because we had a special presentation from people from West Papua. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind as we consider the events of the last few days. West Papua has been occupied by Indonesia. And while their response to that occupation has not been as vicious as Hamas, they are still suffering the same kind of silencing, the same kind of ignoring by the rest of the world. Their problems are not known, their problems are not heeded, and yet they continue to insist on their right to be free. This is a folk song, so it's easy, which means that you could probably sing it with me, at least by the time we get to the end. Once I had a memory that was long. Once I had a garden, now it's gone. Once what I believe your song. Once what once I caught my fish within this net. Once I knew what I should not forget. Once what you will lead us yet. Once what once what our children will return their lives to thee, thou gracious sea. Once what Once I saw the morning star at dawn. Once I saw their armies sailing home. West Papua, you are not alone. Once a once our children will return. Once a our children will return their lives to thee, thou gracious sea. Once a sing with me. Once a our children will return their lives to thee, thou gracious sea. Once a one more time. Once a our children will return their lives to thee, thou gracious sea. Once a once a Okay, let me introduce our panelists this evening. So it's who are you and Peter. Okay. So Kamanamaikalani Beamer, Brenton Maikalani Beamer is a member of the faculty at the Center for Hawaiian Studies. He's also the director of the Center for Hawaiian Studies. He is also the chair of the Naone Hall faculty chair in Hawaiian Studies and Literature. And he and Peter are the co-editors of this fine book, along with Kemaiti Tau, who is not here, but Peter is here. So let me introduce. First of all, Kamana and Peter are both. You were born in Hawaiian, or were you born in Hawaiian?
Everybody's fighting for me.
He might, wherever he was born, the Beaver family is a Hawaiian, and they are a Hawaiian, which is something that he and Peter have in common. Peter having grown up in the area and gone to HPA, Pacific Academy, Hawaii
Preparatory Academy.
Yeah, a place that we all made fun of. Kamala had the good sense to go to Manhattan, and so nobody really makes fun of them. So these two are on this panel. About Kapua, I know. So Peter has also been a senior faculty and professor at Stanford University. Wood Institute? Or,
yeah.
Yes, thank you. These were things I could have prepared. I was too busy thinking of this stuff. And Peter is one of the people that I've known along with Kamana for a number of years because of an amazing organization called the First Nations Futures Program. And we have taken scores and scores of sort of early to middle level land advocates and people who work for their agencies back home from Aotearoa, from Hawaii, and from Alaska, and had these wonderful sessions in Stanford for many years. Your hospitality and your research on Hawaii Island about those amazing places that our ancestors carved out of the hillside and using, just the rains of Kohala to irrigate, without any other irrigation, to grow amazing crops, probably as early as the 1400s. These are the kinds of things that they have done. Kapua has been an advocate for Hawaiian rights, especially water rights, for a very, very long time. And in fact, we knew about Kapua Kapua before she came to work at Richardson because of her incisive analysis and her fearless defense of Hawaiians who were trying to obtain water rights back in the 90s. She is like the other two real heroes we made. And in our communities, in our hearts, in our lives. So I know that you're going to be really touched and moved by the things they have to say. And I know you're going to learn a lot. Make sure you ask them plenty of really hard questions. Thank you very much.
About a hand for Dean Osorio. You ask for an introduction and you get a keynote, so he's gonna always overperform and deliver.
Aloha mai kako.
Aloha.
And mahalo for this opportunity to really kuka to be in conversation with these two thought leaders about their book, Islands and Cultures, which explores our Pacific Islands and how they really offer pathways towards sustainability. To be frank, this is nothing new. In fact, it's quite old. The book here shares ancient biocultural knowledge that enables our people to thrive on the most isolated islands across Moananui-a-Kea, our vast Pacific, our blue continent. And that traditional ecological knowledge is even more important today as our Pacific Islands are on the front lines of this battle against global climate change, which threatens not only our homes, but really our identity as Indigenous people, given how intricately intertwined our cultural identities are to these places. So this evening, we marvel at how our Pacific Island societies develop traditional ecological knowledge and systems that really help to sustain us for millennium. And let's be real, we weren't just like eking out an existence here. We were truly thriving. Unfortunately, given the impacts of global warming, these are now solutions needed by Island Earth. And so we take this opportunity to really uplift the knowledge of our ancestors, especially as reflected in this beautiful book, and we explore how Aloha Aina can save the world. But first things first, we got from Dean Osorio, I'm looking for him, there he is in the second row, the keynote introduction. I swore when I was at Stanford with the First Nations Futures program many years ago that I would never speak after John Osorio. And this usually, who can top it? You gotta have a song, you gotta have something. But here I am. And so, despite those wonderful introductions, what I wanted to do was really, I think what the audience would like to hear is really what your Aloha Aina mo'oku auhau are. So what your personal journeys are that brought you to this work and helped you do what you do. So let's start with Kamana so that you can explain what Aloha Aina is, and then also your mo'oku auhau and how you got here and why.
Yes. Mahalo nui. It's a tremendous honor and privilege to be up here with my amazing colleague, Dr. Peter Vitousek, and my comrade, Professor Kapuaʻala Sproat at Richardson Law School. One of the things I'm most proud of is when your people show up for you, and having Punihe come and open for us, and Kapua, and everyone that's here is. This isn't easy work, and having community and recharging and regenerating each other. Having our dean tease me and mock me in front of 200 people is so amazing. No. And welcome. So I just want to start with that feeling of love. And I want to speak to these students up front here. I met them, we slid out, and they're Kamehameha School students. They're almost all freshmen. There's one middle schooler. Her brother said she jumped in, but she's leading the pack. She's the 8th grader. And I want to start speaking out to them because my Aloha journey was not linear. It was very much twists and turns and circular. And I think it starts for me just with a deep love and admiration for my grandmother. I was blessed to be the only grandchild of Winona Kapuaʻala Mānoa the Shea Beamer. And lucky thing, my uncle never had kids and my dad only had me. My dad said it's because it was perfection, but maybe not. But in any case, I was raised in her presence. And I saw how she committed her life to our culture, to hula, to language, to lifting our students and community up, teaching people who the Hawaiians were and why it meant something for us in this place. And I was the little kid that would hide in the background when she was doing her workshops, and like under the table. I was super shy, and she would be like, eventually when I was about 12, I got used to her putting me on the spot, and okay, dear, aloha chant. I used to be like, turned red, terrified. Oh no, no, but I had no idea that would ground me in who I was and who I would become. Sorry. So it starts with being her grandchild. And then I think it starts with a deep love for our place in Aina. I grew up swimming in the streams. I had a crazy uncle, didn't thrive in a lot of modern areas and places, but water brought out the best in him. He was a mountain man. There was special smoke that would happen when we're up Mauka in the mountains. And he taught me to jump off cliffs and climb waterfalls. And but it was this deep love and seeing how powerful the Aina can change people and bring out the best in them, because he was struggling. And so I just found my way eventually to love Aina, got involved in restoring lo'i, advocacy. I came back from Occidental and started to take classes with Dino Zario, Lili Kalaka Mi'ili Hiva, Haunanike Trask, those me'e, and shaped me in who I am today. So doesn't have to, you don't have to know everything when you're in the 9th grade or 8th grade, or when you're 22 or 26 or 45, I think. But know your love for this place. Yeah, know that you have a role to play, to speak for Hawaii, no matter what anyone says. Yeah, and then I got to meet Peter and collaborate with Peter on islands and models, and work together at Stanford for the last 10 years, and just be so inspired. I've learned so much from our collaboration, and that's a little bit of my journey. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Peter Vitousek.
Mahalo, Kamana. I got as much as I'm working with you as you did for me, at least. So it is very important to me to get a chance to work with you. And I want to say that what Kapua said was correct, that there's nothing new in our book, that it's something that you know. But what you don't know is that how important it is, how new it is to the world. And so when you see what's written and see that we were saying this is important stuff for the world, it's easy to respond, yes, we know that, but you did know that. But did you know that that was important before? That's a critical question, I think. And so it's important to know not just the answers to what the world needs to know, but to know the questions the world is asking. And if you have both of those things, you're way ahead of someone who just has one of them. I think that Hawaiians and other Polynesians and other Pacific Islanders knew a great deal about how to live sustainably on land. But I think that information is something that the world needs now. And that it's fair to ask, do we want to give that to people? But I think that the world needs it. And our lives will be better if we give it to the world. So I hope we will decide to give it to the world. Thank you.
So you two have edited an ambitious scholarly collection on the long history of Indigenous people and Indigenous Pacific Island societies in particular, and the sustainability pathways that we as Moananui Akea have really developed over a millennium. So these are the pathways that I believe can lead us forward to the climate crisis. And, you know, Peter, you talked about how important this question is and whether we share it, but I'd like to press a little bit on that. Why is this book necessary now, given what's facing us?
I think it's necessary because I think that the world needs the information that we have and knows that it needs something desperately, but doesn't really know what it needs. And so if we have answers now, people are ready to listen in a way that they weren't ready to listen before. So I think that it's important that we share that knowledge now.
Absolutely. And thinking about that, you know, some of these important lessons, oops, sorry, so many mics. But thinking about these important lessons from the history of Polynesia, and in particular, how they can serve as solutions to the world's challenges and our climate crisis in particular. What are some of these important lessons from Polynesia?
Yeah, I think, so the scope of the book was really around thinking about how, as our ancestors traveled to different parts across what we call Polynesia today, or what anthropologists at least call Polynesia today, they made distinct different decisions in how they manage their resources. And Peter's work on islands as model systems has really helped to inform the world around this. And so we trace out, you know, some of those different and distinct decisions that in some ways that it was almost the same culture, you know, that moved across into Aotearoa, encountered vastly diverse and different ecosystems. You can't get any more different than Waikiki and Aotearoa, right? Just distinctly different environments and places. And as we did that, we had to adapt. The land affected us, and we affected the land. You know, that's one of Peter's mantras, really, really in his work. And as Indigenous people, we know that to be the case, right? The aina shapes us. We shape the aina. But what happens when you cannot grow kalo because it's freezing in Aotearoa? You adapt and you start to hunt the titi birds, right? And change from a really deeply agricultural society to something kind of a little bit different based off of the aina and lands. And so we kind of trace out some of those decisions across the Pacific. We know about the Rapa Nui story, right, where many resources were sort of consumed, and also the introduction of the rat helped to almost bring it to the point of collapse. And so thinking of islands as island Earth, as models, you know, what can we learn about sustainability and looking at the decisions that our ancestors made collectively? And I want to say, you know, I think of myself as, you know, Oiwi, Maoli. I don't necessarily call myself Polynesian, but you could tell a similar story in Micronesia and Melanesia in different ways. But we wanted to speak to the resources that we had and the people that we had that could try to write the stories of their place. So we focused a little more on Polynesia for that reason.
Thank you, Kaman. I agree with that. And I think that it's important that we think about what is important to living sustainably on land. The fact of our ancestors is that they lived on land and they could see that they were islanders and could see that what was left was all there was or would ever be. I think globally, our society now sees that for the first time. We see that we have pictures of Earth as an island floating in space, taken from the moon. And we have a sense that our waste products are looming large on a global scale from the measurements of the Mānoa Observatory, carbon dioxide there. And so we're all islanders now. And we face the same challenges that people faced as islanders when they were moving across the Pacific and had to do different things in order to survive. We, as a society, can learn a lot from that. I think one of the things that we can learn is it's important to be an islander, to recognize that you're an islander, but it's not enough. You also have to be able to think of resources and the environment as kin. And you have to be able to think in the long term, to be able to think in genealogical terms. 7 generations in the past and 7 generations in the future. And think of yourself as primarily a link in a long chain of people who will be living on this land. If you don't have that, you don't have enough.
So I'll be frank. So Robert wants me to be louder, which is not usually something people ask me to do, but I will endeavor to be louder this evening. So to be frank, to me, this book was really about Aloha Aina at its core, right? Fundamentally about people's connection to place, whether we're talking about people in Aotearoa or Rapa Nui or Kona. You know, Aloha Aina is really the piko that holds it together. It's really our familial connection, our commitment, not just to the future, as you're saying, Peter, but also, and the generations to come, but also to the past, right? And our kuleana to our ohana. And by ohana, I mean both the people and the place. And so I'd love your mana'o on the role of this familial connection, right? This pilina, this Aloha Aina in helping to save our warming planet.
Yeah. So that's the important and perfect question. And what Peter had talked about is we are understanding our interactions with place and the environment, you know, times 1,000,000, times 400 years is bringing our planet to the brink of collapse because of the lack of relationship, because of the excessive waste, because of carbon, because of our lifestyle and the systems and structures that were built around it. Our ancestors had to make different decisions when they went to different islands, and that's really what we're pulling out. So in that quest for me, I started to get involved in circular economy work. I developed some colleagues and collaboration, University of Augsburg in Europe and in Germany, and that really helped me to launch, I think, some of this stuff. But when I was there in Germany, and I gave a talk on Aloha Aina, I try to do the German accent. It comes out sounding Russian or Bolivian or something, so I'm not going to do it. But at the end of my talk, a gentleman got up and he said, "This Aloha Aina will help to save the world." And hearing that, thousands of miles away, 12 hours, halfway around the planet, really struck me hard. And I think what he was suggesting was that, yes, seeing ourselves as kin with the environment. Mother Earth is a real thing. Mother Earth is a living planet and a system. None of us live without Mother Earth. And I know that from a scientific perspective, we want to break it down and understand all the intricacies of that, and that's beautiful. but step back and think of the system. Mother Earth is our kin. And whether you're Kanaka, whether you're Maori, whether you're something else, we're all children of this planet. And we haven't been taking care of mom. And so Aloha Aina helps to reawaken people's relationship to place. And this broader movement all around the planet to create a regenerative economy, to understand, the limits of, to create limits on excessive profits and waste and the vast socioeconomic collapses that we're experiencing, the militarism, the things that Dean Osorio talked about. We need to really reconnect with that relationship all across the planet. And I think that's a part of what this book helps to suggest and reawaken, at the same time as challenging, the cultural indigenous community and challenging the science community, because we have a lot of smart people, but we need action, we need relationships, yeah? What are the things that can bring us together instead of polarizing? And I've been involved in this in Red Hill, on water issues and other things, and we can do it together, so.
Kamana, I think that's right on. I don't have anything to add to that.
So Kamana, you mentioned the circular economy, and I'm going to keep coming back to this. To me, Aloha Aina is really the core of all of this. But how can Aloha Aina inform circular economics worldwide? And perhaps a sketch on the circular economics and how, I guess, Aloha Aina informs that, and maybe looking at Hawaii as an indigenous example with respect to scale.
Sure. Yeah, when we, just like our kupuna did, I'll be honest, it's not a rational decision for me to stand up and advocate for our water. It's not an analytical, I look at the numbers and figure out the facts tell me I should stand up for our water. It is a response to a relationship, to a connection, to an emotion, an innate feeling that I have to this place. And so when working with our German colleagues, they're fantastic at calculations and numbers. And in fact, when we're on a panel together, if my German colleague gets a question, he has to answer it. Like he goes, it has to be done. But when he visited Paipai'oheia, Waipaw Foundation, and saw the way the community showed up to restore fish ponds, to spend countless hours, saw the way the kids, the education system was intertwined with it. They're trying to figure out how to activate people, again, all across the world, all across Europe. How do you restore that connection? How do you get people to change their behaviors? And some of what we do here innately helps to solve some of those challenges and those problems. Doesn't solve them all, but they also help to solve some of our problems. When I think about Aloha Aina and I think about waste and consumption, we can do a better job here on our own islands. We bring in too much, we waste too much. Think of all the food waste that comes through a hotel like this. How do we go from table to back to the farm, right? We want merriments, we want monkey pot, we love farm to table. But how do we take that food waste and then put it back into production? To me, those are some of the insights that thinking about waste and scale and circularity that we can learn from and borrow across Europe. We have to confront vast socioeconomic inequality. We can't do that alone here in Hawaii. And together, I think we can. So Aloha Aina, again, I'm always going to advocate for it because it's innate, but I think other people in the world see that tremendous value in that example, Kapua. And regenerative systems are something that our ancestors did. Our ancestors were system thinkers. If you look at the Kumulipo, there's these dualisms. There's Po and Ao, Kane and Wahine, Mauka and Makai. And because we're on islands and systems, our ancestors, I think that worldview developed not to see things in isolation, but to see them in connection and to see the systems. And that helped us when we designed lo'i to think about caring for the stream and the opu. And then when we use that water to think about what can we do with the fish ponds and aquaculture. Our ancestors looked at the wai, the water system. Wai means water, wai is wealth. And so we developed social systems and structures to be like water. What does water do? It redistributes, it provides nutrients from Mauka to Makai. And our economic and social systems should model water. And so I think those are some of the insights around Aloha.
I think that's right. I think you're right on with that. And I think that we can get a great deal from, from science as well. We can improve on what our ancestors did. And we should do that because they weren't static. They were open to learning new things. And there's an opportunity to learn new things now. And they would have taken it. We should take it too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When I was with Peter at Puanui, the largest rain-fed agricultural system on the planet at that time, tens of thousands of acres producing taro and sweet potato and sugarcane, probably enough to feed roughly 40,000 bodies. And when we're looking at that system, that's what our ancestors developed with tools made out of stone and rope made out of the forest. We fed more people on every island than we do today with those tools. And Peter challenged us to say, okay, but it wouldn't have stopped. If Cook and the population didn't collapse because of diseases, that innovation wouldn't have stopped. So what can it look like in the future? And I think that's what Peter is suggesting is how do we take the tools and the usages of our time with the worldview and the perspective to do everything that we can for today.
Right on. That's exactly right. I think there were more people living in Hawaii in 1775 on every island except Oahu than there are now. And they were entirely fed by local resources, and we import over 80% of our food now. I've seen lots of arguments, different numbers, but it's certainly over 80% of our food. And it was all produced locally then and produced by people with stone tools and their own labor only.
And that's incredibly powerful, right? If we think of more people on every island except for Oahu, except at that time we were completely self-sufficient. And so there are incredibly important lessons from the past that we need to carry, not just us forward as Hawaii, but really people across the globe. I want to think now about the study of indigenous people and societies, not just across Mauna Nui and the Pacific, but including there. I think famously it was Jared Diamond who really used Rapa Nui as a case study of environmental mismanagement, right? But the work that you two have done is fundamentally different in purpose, in orientation, and in findings. And so can you share a little bit about that? Like why? What's so different and why?
Yeah, I think that it is different. And a lot of the difference is that we're impressed with what people did, their successes, where there's a narrative of their failures that we don't see very clearly at all. I think Rapa Nui is an example of constraint, not of collapse. It's a very poor island compared to Hawaii. It's very small. It's about 1% the size of Hawaii, and it's got very infertile soils and no surface streams at all. And so it was constrained from the very beginning in a way that Hawaii has not been constrained. And it probably didn't go through a collapse until European society, by coming crashing in and introducing diseases, drove that collapse.
Yeah, I think about that book is great, and it helps to understand sort of how these systems and structures enabled, you know, almost manifest destiny, or at least the rise of Anglo-capitalism across the world. And it's important to tell that story. I also think our work is drastically different in many ways. And if you can just think for a second, right? What have we done with our resources? You used to be able to drink out of the streams in Hawaii. The water was so pristine and clean, you could drink out of streams. Now, anyone think about drinking out of a stream lately? Not a lava stream, especially. And I want to pause for a second, because that's something that we can fix. That's a design flaw, a problem created by humans that we shouldn't allow to stand. One way that I think of to evaluate the enlightenment of any society is the way that they treat their water, the things that give life. And our work in thinking about our ancestral systems, yes, there was flaws. Jack Kittinger is here. He pointed out, as our ancestors were here in Hawaii, we probably started to degrade the near marine shore fishery. And then guess what? We innovated and created fish ponds. And we did it in a regenerative way, right? So what I'm suggesting is, like, we shouldn't think of, if progress destroys the conditions for life, it's not progress. And I don't mean that as an attack against any worldview or system. I mean it as a child of Mother Earth, yeah? And I think our book, in looking at those ancestral innovations, provides insights when streams were healthy, when ecosystem services were healthy and producing massive amounts for people. It's not, to me, it's not a dream that can happen again, that we can innovate in different ways to restore our streams and systems and feed our people.
So if progress destroys the conditions for life, then it's not progress. Ew. You know, that, and thinking about that, especially in the context of water, brings me to Maui Kumohana and to Lahaina, or Lahaina perhaps, because the horrific wildfires that really ravaged Maui Kumohana in August of this year represent, I think, one, not the first, but one of the most significant climate catastrophes to strike Hawaii, right? And unfortunately, I think not the last. So what can we learn from the past to help us navigate this future, right? And looking to rebuild. We have this, and I won't call it a silver lining because it's not, but we have in this time of Hulihia, in this great upheaval, an opportunity to do things differently. Mm-hmm. So how do we do that in thinking of Lahaina in particular, a land of prophecy?
You know, I think the first thing is to recognize the incredible innovation and strength and power of that community. Even before this terrible fire, I was on the State Water Resource Management Commission for 8 years. So I served 2 terms on the commission, and we were involved in trying to address complex water disputes on Maui. And I saw how strong this community was. I saw how resilient. I saw how the work of the people that stormed the state constitution in 1978 to create the commission and create the public trust and to establish the public trust as a primary part of our law could be implemented. And so I think we have that structure to build off of. Kapua is that incredibly strong and resilient and innovative people community that leaders need to listen to. I think we also have to learn, and you talked about this, about disaster capitalism. My tutu's house, her Hawaiian home's house, is in Leali'i. And so I got a text from my uncle Keola, who I talked about, my dad's brother that doesn't have any children, that I'm very close with. And he said evacuating. And I didn't talk to my uncle for, I think it was about 4 days. Hard to get any knowledge of anything that was going on. I mean, we're all experiencing this in different ways. But, you know, the community rallied together after all of that collapse and everything that's happened. What I didn't expect was the vultures to appear. You know, I was in a period of mourning, and it says something about our structures where, you know, it enables people to come in and try to buy up people and take advantage of people in really, really challenging times. So I think that's something we have to learn to fix, is to, even when we're at our lowest of low, we have to be prepared for the lowest of low attacks, unfortunately. I mean, that, I know that's not fun, but that's what we saw in Lahaina. And I think what we're seeing now is that incredible resilience and innovation where the community has stood up and will probably guide the future of how Lahaina looks in the midst of all these complex political struggles and challenges. And I think, again, you talk to the folks from Maui Komohana, and when they talk about restoring the stream, a stream that didn't flow for 130 years, that now they're growing kalo and they're feeding children, and cultural practices are returning, and the connectivity of streams to the nearer marine shore is spawning fish. That's not something that they're going to ever give up again. And I think that innovation and design in Hawaii can happen around that leadership and around focusing on our way. Yeah.
I think that's right on. I agree with that completely. The fact that community showed a great deal of strength, but it's also true, I think, that the scale of the problem is a global one. And so that it's not something we can deal with entirely locally. We have to change the world in order to live our culture successfully.
I think that's absolutely right, Peter. We do need to change the world, but I think we need to start here. And what I'm seeing in Lahaina, I am so incredibly heartened by the resilience of this community and their pilina, right? Their connection to place, and they're being so deeply rooted in their aina and their vai. I mean, some of the testimony before the Water Commission recently, the kupa, the people of that place talked about how, you know, we know our vai. Do you know your vai? And I think that's something for each of us here tonight to have to think about. To what degree do we all know our vai? Because that is the source of our vai, right? Our wealth into the future. And so our time together this evening is coming to a close. So I wanted to give you folks the opportunity to share any closing mana'o that you want to send the audience home with this evening before we open it up for questions.
Well, I just wanted to say I really appreciated the opening ole about a'ali'i, which I think a'ali'i is an example of a plant that is able to cope with fires that most of our native plants cannot. And so it's an example of a plant that lives between worlds successfully, which we have to live between worlds if we're going to change the world to enable our culture to survive.
Yeah. I just want to mahalo everyone for taking the time to be here. Again, it's such an honor and a privilege to collaborate with Peter on this project. We wrote this book in the midst of COVID. Literally, I remember just running around trying to get my kids in online school, losing my mind, thinking, I don't know how I'm ever going to finish this book. And somehow we did it. And I want to mahalo Kapua for for giving your time and insight and everything you do for the community, but for showing up for us here tonight. And you know, I'm able to sit up here, which is very strange. If you knew me, Shane Lyman, we played football together in high school, probably couldn't have predicted this in those days. But I'm able to be here because of my grandmother, because of Uncle Calvin Ho, because of my peers today, Kaniko Schultz, Kili Kotubete, Stacy Sproat, people that lead communities and restore work all across Hawaii. And I'm so proud of that. So proud of them. And I just want to say that we're all children of Mother Earth, and we can be proud of each other. Think about what we can restore for our communities and our place with the great knowledge systems, with the resources that we have, because this is the last chance for us to do it, and so it needs all of us together. Mahalo.
I have many more questions for Peter and Kamana, but we have about 15 minutes, and Ree is hiding somewhere. Oh, here's Ree. So we have a mic that is going around in the audience, and so if folks have any questions, now's the time. You can raise your hand or make a polite gesture towards Ree, and she will come and find you. And while we're waiting for, we have one question. While Ree's walking towards folks, I also wanted to give Kamana the opportunity to recognize we have some of the contributors for the book here in the audience this evening, as well as Kamana and Peter. And so would you like to recognize everyone who's here?
So a few of our co-authors, this is a tremendous lift together. Dr. Kavika Winter is here. I don't think I saw Dr. Mehana Vaughn is also a contributor. Natalie Kuroshima, Noah Lincoln, Pam, Peter's wife, is a contributor. Dr. Kael Duarte, Temaire Tao, Patrick Kirch, and others. So again, it's a heavy lift, all of us together. Aohe Hananui Ke Aluia. There's nothing too heavy and hard if we're all lifting together. So, yes, mahalo.
Just when you get the questions from Ree or the audience, you'll have to repeat them
for
for
the
the
mic.
lives. Yeah, because they're not. She's not.
So I did hear Dino Zario ask for hard questions. We don't have to take him into account. No, go ahead. Whatever.
My name is Daniel. I'm actually a Kumu. And for me, you're mentioning so many different people that impacted you who are Kumu to you. So my question to you is, how can we empower our Kumu, right? Because they're the ones that are teaching our keiki. And for us, I mean, Kumu, we only can impact it for as long as we have them, you know. And so for me, teaching my own students how to Aloha, how to malama pono, how to just take care of each other and to take care of our land. What are some of the suggestions that you have for us who are entrusted with these keiki, with these komano, to really impact that Aloha?
So we need to repeat the question for the live stream.
Okay.
And so
the question, and Daniel, are you a dorm advisor?
I am.
Daniel is my eldest dorm advisor at Palama. So how about a hand for Daniel?
yeah, Daniel.
So the question was, how do we empower our kumu to advance Aloha Aina? And I mean, you're doing it. I think we have to find kumu that are passionate about our place, that are courageous about our future, that are courageous about blending science and culture and all of these false binaries that people will create and think that we need to play in one side of the field or court. And I see that with you guys in the middle school, in the work that I've done. We have the principal from Kamehameha Schools, Kapalama here, middle school. And see it in the fish ponds and in the charter schools, and yet there's a long way to go. There's still a portion of our population, in public schools that don't have these opportunities, and so, yeah, we have to empower courageous kumu and leadership to do that. And I think we have to tell our own stories. Everybody gets to their destination through different paths. There isn't one way to Aloha Aina, to actualize yourself. And my crazy Uncle Hank that struggled had influence on me in different ways than my tutu that was always loved and honored, and so that journey and that path is different. And I think that's okay. That's human. That's who we are. And we need to give more resources to our people and our teachers, for sure.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I think it's really important that we take the opportunity to support our people. If we don't do that, we are nowhere. And recognize that there are many paths to Aloha Aina. I know that I had a friend who was passionate about protecting land. And I realized that I need to step up and act. I will never act the way she would have acted, but I have to act. If I don't act, I'm not trying.
And if I can add to that about kumu, Peter was doing a lecture once and he talked about Darwin and evolution. And he said, had Darwin come to Hawaii and saw the extreme levels of evolution, he would have understood it that quicker. Yep. The bees that lost their stingers, the plants that lost their thorns, just remarkable. And so I think the teachers like Peter need to see the value of our place of Hawaii. Yeah. What a gift. What an amazing place this is to learn and to study and to grow. Mm-hmm.
I know when I was in high school, we got vials of fruit flies from the mainland and did experiments with them. But we never learned that most of the fruit flies in the world are found only in Hawaii and nowhere else in the world. And right in the forest above us in high school, there were species of fruit flies that were much more interesting to any evolutionary biologist than the ones we were receiving in vials from the mainland.
Exactly. Adaptive radiation at a whole new level. I saw a couple more questions. I see Justice Wilson has a question here in the front. There are a couple more hands. Reef? Yep.
Okay, hearing this, I was always very true, very fundamental. I think perhaps to carry it one bit further is to ask what's happening to children when they're going to school, when they first get into school and they are taught to compete with each other. The competitive outlook that extends all the way to the expensive cars on the street today. So, is there any thoughts in your mind about teaching children meditation at a very early age that will open them up to things, to other ways of thinking beyond the materialistic realm? That's my question.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. And I'm sorry, the question was thinking of young children going into educational systems and structures and being taught basically to compete and every man or woman for themselves type of mentality is what I understood. And he's suggesting mindfulness and meditation training to open up kids to other perspectives and ways of being. And I think yes, absolutely. And I think in many ways, that's what restoring a fish pond does. Standing in a line of 20 kids, learning how to pass rocks without dropping them on your feet, laying them in the right place in the fish pond is all mind, body, presence, mindfulness. And so those are the things that I think are happening in schools, just in different ways. But I do think that's really important. Yeah, mahalo for that. Peter, you want to add?
Yeah, I agree. I think that teaching cooperation, teaching people to be cooperative as they are in Lokuia is an important feature for education.
Thanks very much, really fantastic. My question is regarding Lahaina. You mentioned that in this group of people, we have the opportunity to do things differently. And I'm curious with the tourism industry as currently run, which is inherently extractive, what may start that ball rolling to shift our state's reliance on how things are currently run?
Yeah, coming out of COVID, if you were, sorry, repeat the question. I always listen to Kapua. That's the thing to do. Do what Kapua says, and it's going to be okay. So the question was Lahaina and having the chance to do something different and thinking about tourism as largely an extractive industry, and how can we turn the tide there in that place, in that community. So I was saying, coming out of COVID, do you guys remember the beaches being relatively empty and them telling us to stay in our houses, and we sneak out and go out and see an empty open beach again and what that felt like? We created an entity called Aloha Economic Futures and tried to shift the counties and the state towards a more regenerative, circular kind of Aloha Aina economy, and we looked at tourism in particular. We got the Hawaii Tourism Authority to accept our Aina Aloha Economic Futures Declaration and our matrix in some of the decision making. But I will say, what I was surprised by was how quickly the old models and paradigms wanted to be re-implemented. I'll be honest, maybe I was naive. I thought we would be further along today coming out of COVID than we are. I'm disappointed by that. In Lahaina, when the fires happened and I was busy crying if I had lost my uncle in my tutu's house, I was unprepared for the orders to shut down the water code and to put waters in the hands of powerful plantation interests, going back to an old paradigm really, really quickly. So I'm not trying to pick on leadership here, but my observation is in the midst of crisis, leaders want to go back to old paradigms that in many ways brought us to that crisis because it's comfortable, because it's easier to fail doing what we've always done than to fail doing something new. And I wish I had an answer for how we could change that in the status quo. It's something that keeps me up at night, and I think it is around community organizing. I think it's learning. Amsterdam has adopted the donut economics model. In December, we're doing a conference on circular economies in partnership with UH Innovation. And so maybe learning from other places in the world and in how they're implementing this. Amsterdam was largely, a tourist-based economy. but it's really, really hard because there's a lot of money involved. And yeah, and I think we know. So I'm hopeful that we can create systems and matrices that can push leadership in that direction. But my observation is they want to jump back to the old paradigm really quick.
And
I think that's right, and I think that one of the things we can do about that is to think about what it is we want to teach people about the culture here, about how people lived on the land here. Because I think that places that have the ethic of, we may not be wealthy, but we have some things to tell the world, are better off than places that are seeking after the dollar.
And I will just add with respect to Lahaina that I think, of course, I agree with everything that Kamana and Peter have shared, but I think what this administration has failed to do is really to center the community in decision making. What we are seeing in Maui Komohana and in Lahaina is that we do have housing enough to take care of all of the people who have lost their homes in the fire. We have just prioritized those for the visitor industry, whether that's hotels, whether that's Airbnbs, whether those are short-term rentals. And so we need to make the difficult decisions to center community in resource management with respect to the circular economy, or we will continue to be where we are now. And so that is a hope, I think, in the Huli. And if there is a place that is fierce enough to and resilient enough to continue to advocate for these issues, I believe that it's Lahaina. So we'll see what happens.
This is really something. We have a person to hold the microphone.
It's just a really just.
Is that a message that should be shared? Well, this is really exciting. We have two, revered kahu of Hawaii here. So it's an opportunity to ask you a question from a Hawaii perspective. The role that you have played as a world-class scientist with the heart of Hawaii, famous climatologist, and somebody that has Aloha and has a way of life, is a way of perspective that's global that I think empowers you to answer the question about the reality of global warming, especially for young people, that has to do with the limits that have been set at 1.5 degrees. Theoretically, we're going to get to in 6 or 7 years, and then you will have the cascading events that we're supposed to avoid according to the Paris Agreement. So my question is, can we do it? Is it possible in time to take the action that's needed? I know Aloha Aina is a way to describe the reasons we should try, but do you think we can do it? Is it possible to protect the Earth from 1.5 degrees global warming in time?
Is it possible? Yes. Would I bet on it happening? No, I would not. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's where the international collaborations really are important and powerful, because yes, we've been speaking about Aloha Aina for a long time in Hawaii, and that message didn't resonate with a lot of people. It was seen as resistance. Why aren't you guys for something? You're against progress. But in the midst of climate collapse, partnering with people on regenerative economies and donut economics and circular economies give us an opportunity to inform an economic system that gets us there, perhaps, maybe is our best chance. I will say in my collaborations, there's people in Europe that are refusing to fly. There's a whole movement on degrowth, questioning growth as sort of this innate driver for our economy, questioning the GDP, all this really, really important work to help us design a new system and structure. And I've been inspired by how committed, those people are in those places, Justice. So yeah, I wouldn't want to bet on it, but being a Hawaiian that survived, I would say don't count us out either yet.
And on that positive note, I know there are so many more questions. I have so many more questions, but in the interest of time, I would like to take a moment to mahalo all of the sponsors who helped to make this evening possible. In particular, I'd like to mahalo our Better Tomorrow Speaker Series student staff, especially our new operations coordinator, Reef. I also want to mahalo Outrigger and their fearless catering director, Kia Miller. I'm not sure where she is, but she is amazing. And finally, our Better Tomorrow Speaker Series sponsors, Kamehameha Schools, the Hawaii Community Foundation, our series sponsors, the University of Hawaii's Richardson School of Law, our School of Ocean, Earth Science and Technology, and the Ulupono Initiative. So mahalo to all of them. And mahalo to you folks here in our audience. And can we have a round of applause for our fabulous speakers this evening? It's always an honor to show up for them. So I do want to remind folks that we have a book signing outside as well as cookies and tea. So we're happy to carry on this conversation outside. Mahalo and a hui hou.